This episode of Warp 5 contains mature subject matter. Listener discretion is advised. This episode of Warp 5 is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the non-profit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join in on the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode or any other, please join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's B-A-B-E-L, into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
Hi, this is Tucker Smallwood from Star Trek Enterprise. You're listening to Trek FM.
How we doing, Trip? Ready when you are. Prepare for warp.
Course laid in, sir. Request permission to get underway. Let's go.
Welcome, Boomers, to another episode of Warp 5. I'm your host, Brandon-Shea Mutala, and joining me, as always, is my ever-beautiful, ever-sexy, pregnant co-host, Patrick Devlin.
Ah! What did you do to the eyes?
Oh, the eyes.
Okay, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really good. We're going to have a fun discussion tonight. So this is our second last movie night for Warp 5. We're getting them all done before we get to episode 200. And we've got a very special guest to join us to discuss this wonderful masterpiece in horror cinema. Cameron Jones, how are you doing?
Oh, hello. I'm doing good.
Excellent. I'm so happy to have you on the show. I've been following your Twitter account for a while. You are an absolutely wonderful Twitter follow because you're always posting positive things about movies, about Star Trek, about lots of different stuff. There's so much variety on your Twitter feed. It's great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. I sometimes I think I kind of weird people out because I'm into, Star Trek, horror movies, a lot of different stuff. But I have I just love film in general. So you know what I mean? So I appreciate that. Thank you.
First thing we're going to ask you here tonight is a little bit about your Star Trek history. When did you discover Star Trek? When did you discover Enterprise? And then where would you rank Enterprise in your rankings of favorite Star Trek films? And it's okay if it's not your favorite because it's not my favorite either.
Let's see. I started watching Star Trek. This would probably be 15 years ago. Reruns of TNG on was it BBC? I think it was. Or no, okay. Actually, it might have. This probably went before the BBC channel showed Star Trek. It might have been like G4, one of those old networks that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. So I started watching just. I would catch random Next Generation episodes, and that's how I got into Star Trek. This was right after high school, so this was like 2002. And then I discovered, after I'd watched TNG probably two times all the way through, I definitely wanted more. So then I was able to buy. I got into Voyager. And watched all of Voyager. Voyager holds a very special place in my heart. Then I got to, then I moved on to Deep Space Nine, so it was kind of out of order there. Original series, Enterprise, I just could not, all the films, of course, I couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough of Star Trek, so it's been a big part of my life for about 15 years now. All of my adult life, I guess you'd say, because I think I was about 18 when I discovered Star Trek. And Enterprise, I think I must have watched Enterprise right after it went off the air. Because, I actually, Enterprise is possibly one of my least favorite Treks, but that's saying a lot because of how much I love Trek. So I enjoy Enterprise. I really like Enterprise, and I really think it's a shame that the show didn't get up to 7 seasons, because I really think the show was improving, and it had, the characters had a lot of growth. So I would have loved to have seen more Enterprise, but I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Enterprise. I'm a fan of all Star Trek.
Cool, right on. Would you have a favorite episode or favorite character?
I really liked, gosh, I really need to rewatch Enterprise. It's been a while, but I really liked their Mirror episode, their Mirror Universe episode, which had the really cool alternate beginning, right?
Yeah, In a Mirror Darkly.
That was, I remember that being one of my favorites. And favorite character, I like T'Pol, I like Archer. So I guess kind of a tie there.
I actually just watched In a Mirror Darkly Parts 1 and 2 tonight in preparation for next week when we record, because we're going to finish up our retrospective. So I think they're good. They really hold up, and it's fun how they tied that into Star Trek Discovery.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was nice. I enjoyed that.
Well, Patrick, do you want to describe for the listeners what movie night is?
So, movie night. On the show, they ended up having movie night for the camaraderie of the crew. It was Trip's idea, and they talked about a bunch of different movies. So we went back and we watched these movies, and we commentated on those movies. One of the reasons was it breaks up talking about just Star Trek all the time, and it's something that happened in the Star Trek universe. They watched old time, even old movies for us, actually, but for the most part, and we like to watch those movies and give a rundown of what we thought of those movies.
Mm-hmm. And in the episode Twilight was when they talked about watching Rosemary's Baby here. So
and for those of you who are listening, that's the first mention of what movie we're going to be watching.
Ah, yes, tonight, Rosemary's Baby with my pregnant co-host here. So
interestingly, that was from what I read, that was Roman Polanski's first American movie.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
So.
And you could definitely see some of his influence from his early European work that he did with the dream sequences, I think. That kind of style that's in there and the camera work.
Definitely. I think the dream sequences really, really stand out in the film. Really interesting.
Creepy is the word.
Yeah.
You're looking
awesome. Well, normally, we ask the guest what their initial impressions are first, but I'm going to go with Patrick first this time because this was Patrick's first watch of this movie. So, Patrick, tell me your initial impressions of Rosemary's Baby.
So, this movie, I didn't read too much about it beforehand. Like, I read the synopsis of what it was, and basically, like the back of the DVD cover, basically, is what I read. And then I sat down to watch the movie. Now, as I turned it on, my wife walked in the room, and she had never seen it either, and she had heard a lot of good things about it, so we ended up watching it together. And I can honestly say, for the first time in my life, we did not speak for 2 hours. Because we were that entranced in the movie itself. I mean, I didn't know what to expect walking in, and it wasn't what I expected at all. But I mean that in a good way. Mm-hmm. Like, this movie was really, really well done, and it was creepy at all times. Like, you didn't know who to trust. You didn't know who was bad. And you kind of had the uneasy, at least for me, I had the uneasy feeling as if I was, what's her name?
Rosemary. But
I blanked for a second there because all I could think of was her real name, Mia Farrow. But, I had like the feeling that I think I would feel she was having through these interactions with different people.
You were totally with Rosemary throughout the entire film. You're right there with her.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like you feel like you're her going through these things that whole time, and everything was creepy. Everything was not like scary, but it was all uneasy.
Cameron, what's your history with this film?
Wow. Interesting enough, like, as you know, I'm a huge horror fan. Rosemary's Baby was actually, I think I can say, the first horror film I ever saw.
Oh.
Yeah, and I know now that I was way too young to be watching it.
All the best horror movies need to be watched way too young.
Yeah, I agree. Because it must have been, because it wasn't cut or anything like that, so it must have been like on HBO or something. I was like young. I was like maybe like 13 or 14, maybe. No, probably, 13. And I remember, I don't know. I'm trying to remember why I started watching. I think because I saw it had like a, it was like an R rating or something, and I was like, oh, I'll watch this. I'm probably not supposed to be, but And no, but and I sat there just completely just terrified, completely entranced in the film, and like I couldn't look away. And it was really, it made a huge impact on me. I thought about it for days afterwards. You know, especially at that young age, it was really it really made an impact on me.
Is it a movie you've come back to frequently?
Let's see. Gosh, I mean, I've seen it probably about 12 times over, the last, 20 plus years. So, I mean, it's one I watch when I think, wow, it's been a while. You know what I mean? So,
I think I'm still too young to watch that movie.
Yeah.
Awesome. For myself, I've only seen this movie twice now. The first time I watched it was probably about 2 years ago, I'd say, after I picked up the Criterion Blu-ray edition for it. And I'm really glad that this podcast has given me the opportunity to revisit, because I actually enjoyed it much more this time than I did the first time. I liked it the first time. There was nothing wrong with it, but I was really captivated with it this time. And I was really amazed with the cinematography, the sets, the locations that they chose, and the writing. And, knowing how the movie panned out, because I've seen it once before, it was nice to see some little things plotted out throughout the film and how well it was crafted that way. And I don't know how much that is associated with the book, because I've never read the novel by Ira Levin, but I really liked how it did translate to the screen. And I think that this is an absolute masterpiece in horror.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those ones where, I mean, I think just about every time I've watched it, I've caught something that I didn't catch before, and that's always interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I caught that I don't always pay attention to, but this one was glaring. Early on in the movie, I can't remember exactly when, and I wrote it down, but I lost that list. There's a scene where Rosemary and her husband are coming into a hallway, and they're looking, the camera angle is almost as if the camera's on the floor, looking down at the door. And it kind of set the tone that everything here is going to be kind of off.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't use that camera angle again the rest of the movie that I can remember, but it just seemed odd. And I for some reason, I want to say it was right after the girl committed suicide.
Okay.
Yeah, like the film definitely takes like a darker turn at that point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's one of the amazing things about the movie is they're telling you about this talisman, basically, right? This lucky charm that's not lucky at all, and it has Tannis root in it and everything. And you don't even realize at that moment that they're now setting up the undoing of all of this. You know what I mean? Like the thing that is going to be what drives all of the suspense through this movie is being fed to you right now, and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, it's an interesting little device that they have with this necklace and the smell that they keep associating with it, which plays a really nice twist at the end. Right, when Mia Farrow's character, Rosemary, finally discovers that the doctor that she's been seeing, the gynecologist, pediatrician, he's not on her side. He's actually on the side of these devilists. So just a quick summary for those that haven't seen the film. So Rosemary and her husband, Guy, they rent an apartment of a recently deceased older lady, and they start meeting their neighbors, and they begin to suspect that their neighbors are involved in like devil witchcraft work, and Rosemary begins to suspect that her husband is actually involved and is doing things in order to like advance his career. He's putting hexes on people and stuff like this. And then she's starting to get concerned for the safety of her baby because she's recently become pregnant. And, spoilers at the end of the movie, we find out that the devil actually impregnated Rosemary, and it's actually the son of Satan. And that was the whole goal of this group, was to bring the coming of the Antichrist into the world.
Something that always disturbed me about the film was how quickly Guy is convinced, how quickly Guy is drawn into this. Literally, it's just what I think as I was rewatching it the other day, it's literally like sometime between the first and second, time that he met the Castovitz, he's all in. And that's just really creepy, how quickly he, agreed to join their group.
Mm-hmm. Watching it this time, I think it was right after that first dinner because he said right away, I'm going back tomorrow.
Yeah, I do too. And I think part of it was because he, I think he was kind of testing them too. And I don't believe he put the hex on the other actor. I think they did to bring him in.
He did, because remember Mia Farrow's character
he stole
called
the
about
tie,
the
but
tie.
I think he gave the tie over, and they did it, and that's what convinced him to join.
Okay, yeah, it was kind of like he was testing this out.
Right, like if they can do this, then I'm going to stay. If they can't do this, then whatever. You know what I mean? You
know what? You're probably right, because looking back now, the phone conversation that he had with the agent or whatever, telling him what happened, he did seem really shocked when he found out that the guy like suddenly lost his vision. Right. So you're probably right in that.
Yeah, that's how I took it. And but then like you don't really know it's him at all until the end. Mm-hmm. Like you don't know he's involved or how deep this is. And I still have questions as to whether Dr. Hill is involved or just thinks she's crazy.
Oh, I think about that every time I watch the film, you know, because I mean, there's a point where, you know, you think Rosemary's, you know, she's safe. She's actually going to get out of this. You know, she goes to Dr. Hill for sanctuary, for help. And then Dr. Hill, you know, betrays her. And I'm not sure if Hill is in on it or if he just thinks she's crazy. I lean towards he just thinks she's crazy, but you don't know for sure.
I do too, but it's not really told.
Yeah, I agree. And the reason why I agree, I was going to leave this part till later, but I guess this is a good time to bring it up, is that, you know, sometimes we have to look at these old movies and, you know, with social media bringing certain things to light, like this is an example of gaslighting. And now, while I'm not the best person to discuss this, I do know what gaslighting is, where somebody says something's happening and everybody's like, no, you're crazy, right? And so now it's tough because I interpret this as, okay, this is 60s culture, and in 60s culture, people tend to be dismissive of women, right? In that, like, you know, oh, it's just a case of the nerves. Like, that was a saying that there used to be, like, when people would have, like, a breakdown, they'd say it's just, you got bad nerves or something like that, right? And for a woman to be pregnant and thinking that, you know, these cultists are trying to hurt her baby sounds pretty outrageous. And I mean, like, if somebody were to come to the doctor with this, like, that doctor would be very concerned. And I don't think that doctor would necessarily call her other doctor. I think he might just, like, put her in the hospital right away. I don't think that Dr. Hill was involved. It was just a case of, I'm not going to take this woman's word for this. I'm going to get in touch with her husband because he's the man of the house.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But I also think in his particular case, he may have called the other doctor only because of that doctor standing in the city. Mm-hmm. You know, at the time, he was considered the greatest of greats. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there may have been some professional courtesy that if he was just some other doctor, he wouldn't have followed. Mm-hmm. But because of who he was in his field and what he was considered, that he may reach out to him and say, look, I got one of your patients here and they're losing it. You know?
Right. And I mean, like, that's the one thing, like, I try and look at a movie like this, and I don't know that I necessarily consider this a gaslighting position as well. I think people might interpret that through a modern lens, but it's like, let's pretend that this didn't have the satanic element, and this person came and said all this stuff. Like, you would think that they were nuts, and I don't think anybody would believe them. If you suddenly started ranting to me, Patrick, that, you know, satanic people were trying to overrun your life, I would not take you seriously. I would think you were crazy.
Especially if I was pointing at my doctor.
She hadn't talked to Dr. Hill in how long, and she calls him, and right off the bat, she says, there's a plot against me and my baby. It sounds crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know about you guys, okay? So, like, Patrick and I have talked about this, because even the last movie night that we did The Exorcist, right? And, you know, so, like, we've got two really almost two sides of the same coin here, movies back to back that we're discussing. But it's like, even in there, I'm like, I don't know that I believe in exorcism. I personally am Christian. I believe in God. Therefore, I believe in the devil. But I don't know that, like, the story itself is interesting because it's like, hey, if God could have a baby through Mary and create Christ, then the devil could have a baby through somebody and create the Antichrist. And that's what this story's telling. And so I think that's kind of fascinating. But part of me, even in my faith, is like, I don't know that could actually really happen, right? So even with my faith, I would still not believe a person if they were to tell me this, right? So
even if you did believe it could happen, what are the odds of the person you're talking to it happening to? That's the other thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Right.
People who are very religious are waiting for Jesus to return, right? But if I just randomly came up to you and said, "Oh, by the way, Michael's Jesus," you would be very hesitant to just believe that I'm right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like so it's interesting. So I don't know that I necessarily consider it a gaslighting situation, because in the story of the movie, yes, it happens to be true, but taken out of the context of the movie, if this were to happen, you would just think this person was nuts.
Right. And then you factor in, 1958 culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they wouldn't believe her anyway. I mean, even in that movie, like when her friends are telling her just go get a second opinion, look at the reaction the husband has.
Yeah.
Now,
and
to
we know
us,
why.
that's insanity. But back then, that was more. It was still bad, but it wasn't to the degree we see it as.
Mm-hmm. And we know why the husband is saying that, right? It's
well, we do now,
involved.
but we didn't when he did it.
Right.
It's something interesting that about Dr. Saperstein is I was like, I was just thinking, how did they get this doctor into this coven, basically coven of witches? But then I realized that none of this would have worked without a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had to get a doctor in, to have whoever was going to have Satan's child had a doctor to go to and to deliver the child. So I realized that the doctor, it was necessary, but something I wonder if Saperstein's reputation was something he got in exchange for his cooperation and involvement, because they say he's the best doctor in the city and such.
I think one does go with the other.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is who he is because it's the old, I sold my soul to the devil so I can be the greatest in my profession.
Yeah, that's something I notice and I often wonder about.
Another thing, so this Hutch character is a great character to me too, because he's
Maurice Evans. Yeah, great.
He's a great character because he's trying to stop this the whole way through, and people just keep throwing roadblocks in his way, and he miraculously, and this is when she starts to realize, because he miraculously comes down with a coma.
Yeah, it was the morning he was supposed to meet her after she got the phone call from him the night before.
And this is when I started thinking maybe the husband's in on it, because how else would they know that he was going to meet with her?
See, I love Mia Farrow's character in this, Rosemary, because she's an intelligent woman, she's an intelligent character, and she's putting the pieces together on her own. Like, with all of these people telling her she's crazy, she's crazy, she's crazy, she's still sticking to her guns and putting it through all the way to the end, even when she puts that spoon in the breast milk.
Yeah.
They've given her this pump to pump the breast milk, and she's like, what are you going to do with it? And that friend, Mary Lou, or whatever her name was, Mary June, she's like, oh, we're just going to throw it away. But then she goes to put the spoon in it to test it and sees her reaction to like, no, don't do that. Oh, man, I love it. I think she's a wonderful, wonderful character. And that's an interesting thing about horror movies, is that a lot of the main protagonists in horror movies are women. Right? Like, look at Alien, right? We've got Ripley as your main character there, while she maybe wasn't
Green Queens.
Yeah, so I don't know why that is. Maybe it's like the trope of women are supposed to be the more vulnerable, so if we make them the heroes, that makes them even stronger. I don't know if that's what they're trying to say.
I think part of this is to the credit of Mia Farrow, who when she was good, she was really good. You know what I mean? Like she could be a very great actress. She had some not so great performances, but like I said, when she was good, she was really good, and she was in top form on Rosemary's Baby. She really did an amazing job with that performance.
Yeah.
Well, and they did a good job too, because when they the scene where she shows up with her hair cut.
Yeah.
It's not just her hair that changes. They really paled, they made her really pale, no color whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And then when that pain finally stops, the very next scene, she has rosy cheeks again and her color's back in her skin. And like they really did a phenomenal job of making her, and I'm sure back then they made her lose the weight to be that thin.
Oh yeah, like the transformation on screen is really jarring. It's shocking. It is.
And that adds to the whole creepiness of it all.
I think something else that kind of adds another layer of creepiness to the film is Rosemary's cravings for raw meat and the abdominal pain. That, oh my gosh, it just adds a whole nother level of just freakiness.
So it does. Now here's what's weird though. Like my grandfather liked his steaks that way.
Really?
Yeah, just touch the pan, just cook it enough that you can kill any bacteria on it, because on a full steak, bacteria doesn't grow inside steak, only on the outer layer, and then eat it. He actually liked raw steak, but I mean that wasn't really healthy. And but so I it was weird at that time, like watching the movie. I was like, I don't know if this is a 1958 thing or if this is a something's wrong with the baby thing. Like I wasn't really sure where they were going. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it wasn't until she actually cut the raw meat from the thing and ate it. Until you brought it up, I didn't associate the steak with it either, because that's just a blue rare steak.
Yeah, and there's that great shot where she's eating that whatever it was that came out of that bird. It was a raw piece of meat, and she sees herself in the reflection of the toaster, and here she is, gaunt, white as a sheet. She's got blood on her face from the meat. It's a really shocking moment. She sees herself.
Mm-hmm. And the use of the toaster was great.
Oh yeah,
as to how she saw herself,
because it was kind of distorted, and it really kind of
right. And did it creep anyone else out the way it creeped me out? The ticking clock in the bedroom.
I don't think I noticed it.
Every single bedroom scene. I'm amazed because I literally spent, an hour trying to figure out what that clock meant, like searching online, and I couldn't find it because every single bedroom scene had the clock, and they showed it a few times on the headboard, but you'd hear the tick, 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 tick.
I'll have to check it out again.
Every bedroom scene, and there's a lot of bedroom scenes, but I couldn't put a correlation to that ticking and then something happening in the very next scene or. So, I couldn't...
It's probably, at the very least, it's something that registers in the subconscious, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, maybe it's just a countdown to when Satan's coming, but...
Yeah, possible.
It could just be a creepy noise to use in a bedroom. That's all, you know what I mean? Just to keep you off your toes. Another thing, speaking about bedroom, at the end of that movie, when you find out the baby is the baby of Satan, now you have to look back and go, well, how much of those dreams were real?
Yeah. Well, they were all real, right?
Well, I don't know.
They were all real.
Were they all real? They all actually happened.
Yeah, because the first one... Okay, so let's talk about the dreams here. So I loved the dream sequences. I thought the dream sequences were amazing. So the first one, you see this nun, but the nun has the voice of her neighbor... And there's some other guy in there who has the voice of the neighbor's husband.
I think what we're seeing with the dream sequences is you're seeing a blending of reality and dream imagery.
Right, but what we're hearing is real, but she's mixing it in her mind, right? So and I loved that. I thought that was so creepy because they broke a window or something and they were bricking it over. And to me, that's also the image of them bricking up a church, closing it up. I think that's even more symbolism in the film, right?
Right.
For the Antichrist imagery. But the next sequence is the rape sequence, and that wasn't really a dream sequence because she was awake for that.
Yeah, because
right?
she wasn't fully drugged like she was supposed to be.
Yeah, the neighbor says, as long as she ate all the mouse, because she called it mouse instead of moose, she won't remember anything. She's not conscious. But we know that she didn't eat all of the moose, right? She put it in her lap.
How about all that JFK, Jackie Kennedy imagery? All of that was really kind of bonkers, but really kind of fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Is that on the boat sequence?
Yeah, you hear JFK's voice talking to her. There's a scene where you see a JFK lookalike from the back steering the boat, and then once she's kind of in the belly of the beast, you see that a woman who it looks to be Jackie Onassis talking to her, telling her she should have her legs tied down and such. So the dream sequence is full of all this JFK Kennedy imagery. I don't know if that's just because at the time, this is 1968, this is just a couple years after the assassination.
No, this movie was before the assassination.
1968.
So that's...
Oh, was it? I thought it was 58 for some reason.
No, 68. See, I didn't catch that because, like, I'm from Canada, and while I know who JFK is, I recognize his voice from, like, the moon, we're going to go to the moon speech.
Right.
Right. I didn't catch that was his voice in the movie, and that was supposed to be a JFK lookalike.
Yeah, I don't think it's something I definitely didn't catch it the first time, but yeah, you'll have to check that out next time going in. There's, you definitely hear, somebody... It sounds exactly like JFK talking. You see a JFK with, he's got the trademark hat. And I think all of this also comes from, JFK was famous for spending a lot of time on his boat.
Okay.
So I think that whole boat also goes in with the whole Kennedy thing.
Oh,
right, which at 1968 would be in the minds of a lot of people, in America anyway. And it is interesting that a Polish director would use that in his first film, but...
Mm-hmm.
I guess the screenwriter wasn't Polish, right? Because he didn't write the screenplay, right?
Yeah.
But okay. So I think a better question isn't if the dream sequences are real. What parts of the dream sequence were real? You know what I mean? Like, for instance, when she's raped by Satan, but she sees Satan.
Right.
She doesn't see a nun or her husband or someone else in the role of Satan like she does in some of the other parts, where her imagination is substituting a different person with that voice. Because, and I don't know if the husband even knew at that point with that dream sequence, if he knew that was the plan. Because remember, when he brings her to bed, she talks about trying to have a baby. It's baby night. And he tells her, well, there's always tomorrow. And then when she wakes up, it's reversed.
No, yeah, he definitely knows, and he's definitely a part of it at that time, because he's trying to convince her there's no chalky aftertaste, and he's trying to convince her to eat it.
He's basically trying to force that moose down her throat, you know what I mean?
No, I agree.
That's why he's planned out when the date of everything is. He's like, he knows, he's all in. He's planned out her period. I don't know my wife's period schedule.
Yeah.
But I do. That's not what I mean. I know he knows that she's being poisoned. I don't know. I guess I didn't know if he knew why. Because if you knew that was the case, right? Why wouldn't you just tell her you were going to try then?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if he's trying to. Yeah, it is. I know exactly what you're saying. It's weird because she's like, no, this is baby night. And he says, no, there's always tomorrow.
Right. Why even give her the inkling to say there's tomorrow?
I always thought that was weird too, because in the next morning he's like, well, no, it was baby night, so that had to happen. It is kind of odd.
It's odd because she woke up and she remembers, right? He saw her wake up when she was having sex with Satan there, right? And so he's doing it as a cover. He didn't actually have sex with her that night, but she remembers having sex with something last night. So with him telling her, while you were asleep, I went ahead and did it, she's creeped out. And that is creepy. Like, if she's exhausted and tired and he went ahead and had his way with her, like, that's a creepy thing to do. That's not okay.
I see what you say. That they wouldn't have been able to mark the pregnancy down to the day. So if she hadn't have had that, if she hadn't have been conscious and remembered, they would have just probably slept together the next night, and that would have been when they conceived the baby.
I guess it's because Satan leaves the marks on her, and that's when she really realizes it was all real.
Right.
And if he had just said, well, instead of like arguing with her, like, oh, I know, but I don't want to miss a chance. Like, instead of, you said you wanted to. I'm sorry. Like, instead of arguing with her the night before, I don't know. It's just that whole him arguing with her and then him like being like, no, it was baby night, just seems weird.
It was kind of weird, yeah.
But it's also to throw the audience off to say this is weird, right?
Yeah, true. I mean, I guess it did what it's supposed to do, right?
Yeah, speaking of that, I have a question, because this is something I've always wondered. People going to the theater in 1968, seeing this movie, they don't know anything about it, were they supposed to not know for sure for the majority of the movie if these things were really happening, or like I've always wondered, like throughout most of the film, are we supposed to be kind of wondering if she just is crazy, if she's seeing things that aren't happening? I've always kind of wondered that.
I think the viewer was supposed to know something was up, but I don't think you were supposed to know all the players till the very end.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, because I mean, the things are so blatant that you're like, no, this stuff is really happening. Yeah,
like to me, it was so obvious that the woman who lived next door, Minnie, was the head of all this, and it turns out I was dead wrong. It was her husband.
Yes.
Well, because she finds out it was his father was a master witch or whatever. I don't know. What do you call them?
She learns all this from the book she got from Hutch, which Rosemary sees that picture of Adrian Marcato, and Rosemary makes a jump that, that must have been his father, but I think that was actually him. He just has extraordinary long life because he's a witch, I think.
Well, I don't know. I interpreted that he is the son. Right, because with the dates that she gave, with how old he is and when that kid was born in the book.
Oh, right, yeah.
And she's like a 79. It works out perfectly.
74, I thought, but yeah.
I got to ask, though, what's up with these bad guys in movies all the time using anagrams for their bad guy names?
Oh, I know.
It is a big trope, huh?
Was it Dracula, Alucard?
Yeah, Alucard, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, they do it a lot, and... But it was freaky, and then he just throws the book away, which you later find out it's because he's trying to make sure she doesn't know.
Right.
She can't keep. That was a great scene when she figured it out, though, because the name is an anagram, so she kept trying to figure out the name of the book.
Yeah,
what it turned into, and it was coming up with like these ridiculous things. And even at one point, she was like, you could tell she was just like, "This is ridiculous. Like, I'm crazy. I'm losing it. This is not right." So now you start thinking, oh, man, she's crazy. She's been losing it this whole time. And then she realizes, no, it's the father's name messed up. Is this
No, the son's name. It was the son's name.
Okay, but but if you change...
I think it's if you take the letters from Adrian Marcato, it spells out...
No, it was from Stephen. It was because
Stephen.
Stephen was underlined in the book, which
Stephen
is the son's
Marcato.
name.
But if you rearrange it, it's whatever... Roman Castavets.
Yeah, which is weird. It's funny watching this because the guy that plays Guy is John Cassavetes.
Yeah.
Right. So Castavet is these neighbors, and it's kind of weird. And then his name's Roman, and the director's name is Roman, and I don't know. Like, it's kind of weird that this character has this name. But so is that like Chekhov's Scrabble board then, Patrick?
Yeah, because that did pop up early in the movie, right? And then it came into play huge later on. There's a lot of Chekhov's things in these movies. So, awesome. Interestingly enough, if you had an apartment that looked anything like those apartments, they'd be millions of dollars even in 1968.
Yeah, the Bramford, yeah, totally.
Yeah, and the Bramford is actually the Dakota, which is made famous because Lennon was shot there. Lennon? Was it Lennon?
Was shot out in front of the apartment building, I think, right?
Yep, the Dakota. The same building that movie is filmed at. But years later, I mean, he died in 1981. This was filmed, obviously, in 67, 68, but...
Did either of you, did you notice that the previous tenant, I think it was Mrs. Gardenia, when Rosemary and Guy are being shown the apartment, she sees some notes, because the woman had just died a couple days ago, and I was managed to pause that, and one of the notes she had written says, "I can no longer associate myself." And then you see that she's moved that huge chest of drawers in front of the closet, which we now know was the way that the apartments were connected, was through that closet.
Oh, and I totally missed that in that moment that you're supposed to notice that, right? So thankfully they bonk you over the head with it later on. But when she runs and gets in the apartment, close it, and she keeps him from getting in.
Oh, that scene is so great when those people just walk behind her.
Yeah,
oh,
and
my
goodness. My wife goes, "How'd they get in?" I go, "I don't know, fire escape."
It's so creepy.
Yeah, it's so awesome. So that's what I was talking about when I'm like things that are set up in the movie that pay off later on. Like, I love that. That's great.
So and that would be the bad guys, Chekhov's cabinet.
Chekhov's cabinet. Chekhov's secret passage.
Or like find a Klingon name or a Romulan names passage. but that was awfully weird when she decides to go at the very end of the movie and go to that passageway, and I guess she at that moment finally figured it out that that's how they're getting back and forth, because she wants to know where her baby is this whole time. Her baby's just gone. They've taken it from her, and when she goes in, that whole scene. Like, she gets the knife, she hides, she uses the knife. That was creepy to me, to stop the bassinet from going back and forth.
There's that classic shot of her. She uses the kitchen knife to stop the cradle from rocking.
And the biggest kitchen knife she could have found.
Oh, yeah, like total Michael Myers kind of kitchen knife, yeah.
She goes into the other apartment, and at that point, like, one person turns around and kind of looks at her. Nothing happens. She walks a little bit farther, and someone screams. Mm-hmm. It was very... I don't even know the word. Like... From start to finish, I spent 2 hours and 16 minutes just feeling uneasy.
That's good. Awesome. The movie did its job. That's great.
Yeah, no, I'm not upset about that. But, like, I know I keep saying it, but that's how I felt. It was just uneasy from start to finish. Like, this isn't the kind of horror movie where you're like, oh, no, a lot. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that kind of horror movie. Things aren't going to jump out.
It was almost, like, too real in a way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, you just felt like, I don't know, something about it just seemed like...
Yeah, like you said in the beginning, you're with her the whole way. You are her through this movie, and, you know, it's not, like I said, it's not a shock factor movie, typically. I mean, there's like the scene at the end and stuff, and her facial expression when she sees the baby is unbelievable.
Amazing. She just really captured that moment.
And kudos to them not showing a really bad version of a devil baby.
Mm-hmm.
They left it to the imagination, which is the scariest thing of all.
Yeah, thankfully. Well, you know, again, I read something in about Roman Polanski afterwards that he had realized that the best kind of horror was the ones where you never actually get to the horror. It's the anticipation moving up to that moment that's actually the best part of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Rosemary's reaction and her face tells you everything you need to know about what she's seeing.
Yeah, well, what's great, too, is, I don't know if you caught this, but when she's screaming about his eyes, and they say it's the father, he has the father's eyes, he has his father's eyes, her husband went into the other room and was hiding his face.
Yeah.
So you couldn't see his eyes. Like, so now I'm like, well, what'd they do to his eyes? I want to see his eyes now. And then they tell you, well, that's not the father.
Yeah.
Satan is his father, Rosemary.
That scene is really disturbing to me, like, you know, as a Christian, to see, like, a room full of people worshiping the devil and praising the devil.
How many decades later, just to see them all, you know, hail Satan, God is dead, you know?
Yeah.
And the way Roman is preaching it, especially when he's at the bassinet, the black bassinet with the upside-down cross and everything.
Yeah, it's really shocking stuff.
It's almost as if you see him doing this, and you're like, oh, wow. I've seen videos of preachers like this. I mean, they weren't espousing this, but...
Oh, yeah, you're talking about, like, when, at the end, when Roman he's basically, you know, he's celebrating and all that.
Yes.
It's almost like he's preaching, yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, I've seen videos of preachers preach in this manner, you know, and obviously they're not telling you to love Satan, but...
It was the cadence of his voice, and he was excited, and he was filled with, you know, joy and what he was saying.
Yeah, it was just, and again, the fact that he's talking about Satan makes it uneasy.
Yeah.
I can't say enough good about this movie, though. You were in a state of suspense from start to finish.
Yeah, those eyes, I don't think I'll ever get that shot of Satan's eyes out of my head. Like, I don't know how they did it, but they're just truly frightening.
Right, which is perfect, because now you know what the baby's eyes look like without seeing this awful makeup job on a baby or on a doll, you know, like...
You picture it in your head, and it's terrifying on a baby, and it's terrifying, period.
They explain it. They explain the hoofs. They explain the fur. You know what I mean? Like, so you know what the baby looks like without having to see it.
Yeah, it's very well done.
The interesting thing about this movie here, so we've had this movie, and we had a TV sequel for it. Like, just talking a little bit about the history. There was a TV sequel that was made in '76 called "Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby." They remade it in 2014 for a 4-hour miniseries for NBC, and Zoe Saldana, who played Uhura in the Kelvin timeline.
Oh, I remember that. You're right. And there's a link to Star Trek there.
Yeah, I never seen it.
Yeah, neither have I. But then shortly before he died, Ira Levin actually wrote a sequel called Son of Rosemary. And, you know, like, the Criterion Edition has got some really great bonus material on it, and there's a really awesome audio interview from a radio station with Ira Levin talking about the release of this second book, and it talks about it talks about him writing the book and in reference to the original movie and stuff like that. So I don't know. I highly recommend the Criterion edition. Some other interesting things about the making of it here. So when she started making the movie, Mia Farrow was married to I just had it here, the singer Frank Sinatra. Right. Huh. And Frank Sinatra started to get jealous of the success that she was having making this movie. And he actually asked her to stop production of the film, and she said no. And he made it down to, like, you're either going to quit this movie or we're getting divorced. And she decided to stick with the movie. So they ended up divorced. So, but that was really fascinating to hear about during the production of the film.
But that goes back into your original point, way back in the beginning of all this, that, in that in that time, her opinion didn't matter. Your career is not important.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is, and what I want is, and I don't want you doing movies like this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to say Frank Sinatra's a jerk, but that's how it was back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, John Cassavetes was a filmmaker of his own right. He was a director as well. And so him and Roman Polanski kind of butted heads quite a few times as well on some of the choices in the film. So interesting behind-the-scenes information on this film. I love this movie. I think it's great. Cameron, did you have any final thoughts? Is there any topics on the film that we missed that you'd like to address here? That was something you'd like to bring up that we haven't talked about yet?
Let me think. How great was Ruth Gordon as Minnie?
Thank you. She was outstanding. She was perfectly annoying.
Yo, thank you.
Okay? She was perfectly annoying. She did such a great job. That accent that she had was great. Her attention to detail on the carpet when her husband spilled the wine or the champagne, whatever. And then when Rosemary dropped the knife and she picked up the knife and rubbed the wood.
Yeah. She's all worried about her floor.
Plus all the questions about, well, how much was this? What did you do with that? I love what you did with this room, that.
And not to mention when they came over to visit her and her friend, and they just started knitting.
Oh, I know. How crazy was that? Totally bonkers.
What an awesome character moment. That it's that's what these old ladies do. They sit down, they gossip, and they knit.
Yeah. She was absolutely fantastic. Of course, she won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, awesome.
She
Great.
deserved
I didn't
it.
know that. Yes.
She definitely deserved
it.
Did.
Yeah, you had Rosemary's Baby coming out in '68, and then The Exorcist was, I think, 4 or 5 years later. So, and then there was an avalanche of Satan, black magic films that came out in the wake, and I think this all kind of cultivated into what they call the Satanic Panic of the 1970s, which went on throughout the 90s. So it really, there was the movie had a profound effect on everything.
A lot of times they give credit to The Exorcist for kind of boosting that.
Uh-huh.
But from what I read, The Exorcist doesn't get made without Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
That was its biggest influence, And interestingly enough, originally they were thinking about making the baby an alien. But that had already been done, so they decided to stick with the devil.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I remember reading that because and at first Polanski was like, oh, the devil. I don't want to do the devil. I'd rather do an alien. But no, then he went with the devil, and I think it was perfect.
I don't know if the movie holds the same historical significance if it goes with the alien. Now the movie would still be great because you still have all that suspense and everything going up to it. But you'd have to change. Minnie wouldn't be the same. Roman wouldn't be the same. A lot of things would have to change. And I don't know if this movie holds up the way it does if they went with aliens instead of devils.
And how do you all think of the end? The one woman she's rocking the baby too fast, and Roman says, no, come over here, and tries to get Rosemary to rock the baby. Rosemary says, no, you're rocking him too fast. And she comes over. And, Roman is trying to encourage her to rock the baby.
Like a mother can.
Yeah. She says, you're trying to get me to be his mother. And, he says, aren't you his mother?
Right.
Yeah, well, just before that scene, he tells her, you don't have to join. Just be the mother he deserves.
Right.
And in the end, I think she loves her baby despite it all.
I see that ending scene as it's like that mother's instinct that she can't get rid of, like that mother's protective instinct that, most mothers have, I think.
Did that shock, did it shock either of you upon the first time viewing that ending with the way it ended?
The fact that it ends on the scene of her rocking was very jarring for me. And I just watched it yesterday for the first time. But
Yeah, I think it was perfect ending. It was great.
So I didn't get my final thoughts, but let me give them real quick.
Yep.
Okay, so one thing we didn't mention, the Tannis root doesn't exist, but when she's flipping through the book, they actually show a picture of it, and it's actually mandrake root.
Okay.
Which held exactly the same properties, quote unquote, for witches that Tannis root does. I mean, so they just changed the name so that people didn't know it was mandrake root.
I was expecting them to say it was like Devil's Club or something like that, like just something with a devil's name in it. And when it's Tannis root, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, right. It would have made more sense, but mandrake root does smell awful. Mandrake root does supposedly allow you to control.
Oh, really? So it was based off that completely,
right? And then the mandrake root, most people don't know from anywhere other than Harry Potter, which I don't think it does any of that in Harry Potter, but I'm not sure. Because it became famous in Harry Potter. But, yeah, so that was one thing I wanted to mention because I found that interesting that they changed the name, but they really did use something that quote-unquote witches would have used, And I guess I really can't put this movie over enough. I mean, really, if you're listening to this still, you need to go watch this movie, even though we ruined it for you.
Yeah, totally.
Go check it out. This film is a masterpiece. My final thoughts. I love this movie. I think it's great. I wanted to ask the both of you, between the two, which do you think is better, The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby? Cameron, I'll start with you.
As a horror fan, especially what I call a retro horror fan, I love them both. But I think as far as which one is my personal favorite, and it would have to be Rosemary's Baby.
Patrick?
Without question, it's Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we I had a tough time with. I think Exorcist is way too slow for the first half of the movie myself, and I don't love it. I enjoyed it more the second time I watched it for Warp 5 here, but the first. I mentioned in that podcast, the first 3 or 4 times I tried to watch the movie, I fell asleep every time. I thought it was the most boring movie I'd ever seen in my life.
It's definitely slower, and like we've said many times, it's you're not as emotionally invested in The Exorcist as you are Rosemary's Baby.
No, and I think for me it killed the movie. The slowness in the beginning took me out of being able to be emotionally invested in the characters. I just didn't care by the time stuff started happening. Yeah. And then when it did, you were kind of like, oh, all right.
Cameron, out of 5 gaslights, how would you rate this film?
Oh, Rosemary's Baby definitely gets 5 out of 5 for me.
Patrick?
5 out of 5, easy.
Yeah, me too. 5 out of 5. This is really good. Excellent. Cameron, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure having you on. It's been a great conversation. Where can the listeners find you online? Why don't you tell them what your Twitter handle, and then is there anywhere else they can find you? Twitter handle.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this. It's one of my favorite things in the world is talking about horror or / sci-fi with fellow fans, and I really appreciate you having me on. I've had a great time. You can follow me on Twitter, and it's at Paramystery. That's at Para_mystery.
And you don't do anything else? Any writing or anything like that?
I write for a local publication here in my small town, Scioto Post, and I give presentations on. I've given presentations on film. I love to write movie reviews. I do all kinds of stuff.
Well, talking about the Antichrist is not all we've been discussing here on the network this week, so please take a listen to this clip and see what else you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, The Ready Room.
But Larry, how do you know that there's not a house somewhere out there on the Forge where Cybok's in the living room, Michael's in the living room, and there are like 6 other people in the living room that Amanda and Sarek and Spock never talk about?
Oh, sure, they took us in for a while and they threw us in the house on the forge.
The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
Wait, so what switched between your two lists?
Calypso comes in. Runaway comes in second in importance.
Right. Okay.
But Calypso comes in second in enhancement of the season.
Okay. I see.
And really, even in importance, I could probably, in my head, flip Calypso and Runaway. Because I don't need Runaway.
Standard Orbit.
Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, is the best named movie of the first 6 movies, I think. Because from a marketing point of view, from a Star Trek point of view, it's just a great title. You know, not talking about the execution of the film, I just mean it's a great title. The other movie titles were you know, I mean, they weren't that creative.
Literary Treks.
So I think if you have an idea or a story for a Star Trek novel, you would be better served if that came on the heels of the 10 pieces of fan fiction that you've written or whatever, or things that you've written on your own that not necessarily fan fiction, but if you've practiced as a writer and have honed your craft, because they're going to want you to be a good writer.
Yeah, they're gonna, and that comes back to, you know, they're gonna tie in editors, and this is not just Star Trek. This is anybody. They're gonna go with people who have demonstrated an ability to hit their marks clean, easy to work with, or at least able to work with, and can do that on a. It's like, okay, I did it once. No, okay, well now do it again. Now do it again. Now do it 3 times in a row. Now do it 5 times in this one calendar year.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcast. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave a star rating and written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
Patrick, here, I've got this nice white creamy drink for you. Will you drink it?
What?
It's good for you.
Does it have tannish root in it?
Yeah.
No.
Among other things.
Among other things. It's a vitamin
other
drink,
stuff
right? Better than any
vitamin.
pill.
Yeah, it's better than any pill. It'll serve you good. Okay. How much did you pay for that chair behind you?
This one?
Yeah.
So I don't remember. It's my wife's.
Oh. Okay, well, you tell me later how much you paid for it, okay?
I think it was like $80.
$80?
I think so. But she used it for sewing, usually.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type LBABE. That's an anagram for Babel.
No. Abelb would be an anagram for Babel.
LEABB?
No, ABLEB. Abelb.
Abelb. Sounds like an old man name from like the turn of the century. My name's Abelb.
Abel O'Connor. I remember when kids played with sticks.
Type that into the search field and on Facebook, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select Warp 5. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Patrick, where can people find you when you're not trying to choose wonderful wallpaper for your new baby room?
Well, when I'm not doing that, they can find me painting a room, possibly. But no, really, they can find me on Twitter. My name is MagicDrop5 there. It is one word. The 5 is a digit, not a number. Lying. Digit, not letters. They can find me hanging around the Babel Conference as often as I can. And they can find me over on The Edge on this network with my good friend Amy Nelson. And soon they can find me on Magical Mutterings with Chris Tribuzio as my my co-host, good friend. And that is on the UFP network, the United Federation of Podcast Network.
Awesome. It's a great place.
What?
It's a great place.
Wonderful place. Love the place. So, Brandon, Where can people find you when you're not giving me little lucky charms that make me want to throw myself out a window?
Well, no, it's not that they made her want to throw herself out the window. They told her what they wanted to do, and that's what made her jump out the window.
Yeah, I mean, it also helped them control her for a long time.
Yeah.
You know. But he did say, I told you shouldn't have told her.
It's not controlling you very well. You're just out of control.
I'm uncontrollable.
Uncontrollable. Your uncontrollable urges.
Yes.
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon-Mutala. You can find me here on the network with The Line, which is our new Star Trek Picard podcast. You can find me over on the United Federation of Podcast Network with my friend Zach Moore from Standard Orbit. There we have a show called Franchise Fatigue, where we talk about movies and their sequels and their remakes, and we go through all of them one at a time. That's a lot of fun. And Patrick was recently on for an episode of Toy Story. Was it Toy Story 2?
Toy Story 2, yeah.
Yeah, Toy Story 2 you joined us for.
When the franchise wasn't fatigued yet.
It didn't get fatigued until the fourth one.
No, it did not, but it most certainly is now.
Yeah, the third one was really good. The third one's my favorite.
2 is my favorite.
3 is my favorite. You're wrong.
No. Who has the Disney podcast?
Not you anymore. You're fired.
Who records them and leaves them on his computer?
You. You can also find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network with my friends Chris and Tom. We have a show called Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast, and we cover all of Hitch's films one at a time, and that is a whole heck of a lot of fun. By the time this is out, just in a couple of days, next Friday actually, we're going to have our awesome discussion on Jamaica Inn, which was a really, really fun movie. I don't think it earns the reputation it has. I thought it was a great movie, so take a listen to that. It's a good one. If you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's REOTAPN.
Trionpa.com/TrekFM
to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more, available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM. And at this time, we'd like to thank the wonderful associate producers of Warp 5, Norman C. Lau, Floyd Dorsey, Mike Morrison, Tim Cooper, Justin Ozer, Mark Flessa, Chris Tribuzio, and Jim McMahon. Thank you so much for your support of the network, as well as Warp 5 in particular. Patrick, we've only got one more movie night.
I'm sad.
Yeah, I know, because it's
I like
over.
movie night.
Movie night's been a lot of fun.
You're not having me on Franchise Fatigue anytime soon.
Never again.
Oh.
No. Yeah, we'll have you on again.
You broke my heart.
I'm sorry. But next time we're going to go as well. So, just for the listeners behind the scene, we've recorded these last bunch of episodes here out of order, since
massively out of order.
Massively out of order, just because of scheduling and working with people. So we've actually already recorded our next episode on Court Jester, but we haven't recorded the exit, which we're going to do right after this, because now we've watched Rosemary's Baby, and we're going to give you a ranking of all of them. So make sure you stay tuned all the way to the end of that episode, Court Jester, so that you can hear our rankings on all the films. But that's all we got for you tonight. Until next time, when we finish off our series on the season 4 retrospective, hopefully with our guest, I'm crossing my fingers, Kevin Dillmore. I've been working
hopefully with him. Me.
Hopefully with you as well, yes. And hopefully you don't lock your keys in the car.
Or get a flat.
Or
I'll break a leg at work. I mean, anything can happen. It's
or
a
have
wild
your water
world out
break.
there.
Have your water break.
That give birth to Satan.
That'd be a terrible thing to happen.
That would be horrible. I think I'd get an excused absence for that.
From work. I think we should probably put a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode too for mature subject matter. What do you think?
We have to do that for yeah.
Until next time, remember, you can't be afraid of the wind.
Recording, yeah, got it.
Welcome, boomers, to another episode of Warp 5. I'm your host, Brandon-Shea Mutala, coming to you from the nether regions of the Klingon Empire with itchy feelings in my forehead. Wait, no, that was the last episode I did. What am I doing? I'm going into my affliction and divergence so that I just recorded an hour ago.
What we're doing here.
I'll start again. I just recorded an episode with John Tenuto and like 2 hours ago.
And started it exactly that way.
And yes, pretty much.
Without me, because my keys were locked in my car.